When You Trap a Tiger, chapters 42 through 46, and the end of our book. Chapter 42. The nurse leads me down the white hallways again, and I have to hurry to keep up with her. I'm really sorry, she says once we reach the door. I still remember when I said goodbye to my grandmother. It's so hard. But I'm praying for you, honey. Mom sees us and runs over. Lily, you scared me. You can't run off like that, especially not now. She pulls my head toward her and breathes me in. Okay, Halmoni wants to talk to you. My mind swirls with the tiger's words. I take a breath and I step inside towards Halmoni. Sam stands. She doesn't bother wiping away tears, but she rubs my arm as she passes and leaves the room. Then it's just me and Halmoni and the hospital machines beeping next to us. I half moon my palms with my fingernails, and I sit on the gray hospital chair beside the bed. It's scratchy, and the fabric scritches against my thighs. Lily Bean, Halmoni's hand twitches in a way that seems almost inhuman. That seems wrong. And I'm scared and sad, and a little piece of me wants to turn away. But I grab her hand, and those feelings don't disappear. I realize there's a love there, too. And that's stronger than anything else. I'm seeing the truth, Halmoni says. I see my mother, my Uma. She finally find me. Halmoni, I whisper, I think I saw her too. Halmoni smiles. You always see, little egg. That is your power. My chest hurts, but I squeeze her hand, tracing her lifeline with my thumb. All my life I spend so much time, so much energy hiding my heart. I am scared of tigers, but more I am scared of tiger in me, she says. I thought I have to hide my words because my English not so good. I thought I have to hide my heart because I feel too much. And I thought I have to hide my story because I think if I tell it, it is who I am forever. She takes a shallow breath. But when I keep it tight, tight, it eat me up. I don't see the love all around me. Hope rages inside me, even though I try to stop it, even though I know how dangerous it is. Maybe everything can be okay now that you realize that. You can heal now. I am ready now. My throat feels swollen shut. I'm not. She closes her eyes. Sometime the strongest thing is to stop running, to say, I am not afraid of tigers. I am not afraid to die. But I'm so afraid. For a fraction of a second, I see a flash of a tiger's face beneath her expression. It's gone almost as soon as I can see it, but I know what I saw. It's the fierceness in her, the courage she'll have in her next chapter. She will be brave. Sam and Mom come back then, and Sam sits on the other side of the bed and holds Halmoni's other hand. Mom walks over and rubs my back. With her eyes still closed and her lips lifted into the smallest smile, Halmoni says, whisper fierce, tell me a story. Sam looks at me and reaches up with one hand. She makes a grasping motion, as if she's plucking a star from the sky, and holds it out for me, out to me. As the edges of my mind, a story starts to form. It comes together from mist and shadow. It takes shape. I scoot towards Halmoni, closer, closer, and I begin. Chapter 43. Long, long ago, when Tiger drank the stars, 10,000 suns and 10,000 moons after a girl stole stories from tigers, two little girls lived with their Halmoni in a house on a hill. They were sisters, one with long black braids, one with dark eye makeup. Once they'd shared everything, but over time they'd grown apart, grown alone. One day the Halmoni went to the village to buy rice and happy nut crackers for her girls. But she got trapped in traffic. She got home late, much later than usual. The sky was dark that night. Rain clouds covered the stars, and when Halmoni passed by the windows, her shadow shifted, taking the shape of a tiger. It may have been a trick of the dark, but they could not tell. Little girls, the Halmoni said, let me in. The sisters peeked through the window, but that night their Halmoni looked different. She was transformed. The sisters were afraid. They didn't know what to do, so they tried to change her back. Unya scattered the rice, and Eggy spilled the stars. They tried everything, but nothing worked. Finally, when there was nothing left but the end of the story, a sky god saw them and took pity. See, centuries before, a different sky god had created a tiger girl who walked both worlds. Even the gods made mistakes, but as it turned out, the mistake hadn't been the tiger girl after all. The mistake was making her choose. The mistake was creating a world where she had to hide, where she was afraid to be everything at once, fierce and kind, soft and strong. But that was an old god with old ways, and the new god recognized her family and her great granddaughters. So she dropped a staircase for Little Egg and a rope for Unya. Come, said the new sky god, there is something I want you to see. In the hospital room, I taste salt and I realize I'm crying. I look up and see Sam. I feel Mom's touch on my back. Beneath my fingertips, Halmoni's pulse gets weaker, fading away. Keep going, Sam whispers. The seconds swell. I take a breath. There are so many endings to choose from, and I find mine. Together, the two sisters climbed up, and when they reached the sky god, a sky tiger, she showed them the galaxy filled with jars. Some jars had been carried across the world, long hidden. Others had traveled across the sea to a flea market by the coast, hoping to find their family. And all of these jars released the truth and longing and love. Open them, the tiger said. The girls were scared, but they were brave too. They believed in hope. They opened the jars and stories. Some were scary, some were sad. But the girls only felt proud because this was the story of their family, generations of women who'd fought for their hearts, women who could be everything and anything. Now you can tell your own star stories, the sky tiger told them, her voice scritching like coarse fabric against their ears. Light is not limited. So the sisters began to speak. They told stories of their Halmoni, who always wore sequins and always saw her granddaughters, who risked everything for happiness and did anything to protect her family, who believed in invisible things like spirits and magic and love. The girls talked about their Halmoni, who taught them to see the world and to see themselves. As they spoke, they filled the sky with stars. The sisters lit the world, and in the light, they found their way back home. In the light, they saw they were not alone. Chapter 44. When I finish my story, Halmoni is smiling. Her eyes are closed, and her pulse flutters. Barely anything anymore. I love you, I tell her. I squeeze one of Halmoni's hands. Sam squeezes the other. Mom strokes her hair. This is the end, but it doesn't happen right away, not like in the movies. Over the next few hours, her breath becomes softer and softer. We watch as she fades. The stories were supposed to save her, I say, in a small voice. Mom makes a noise, and when I look at her, there are tears in her eyes. They did save her, Lily. They reminded her that the world is big, that she could be anything, that she was everything to us. Halmoni looks so pale lying on the bed, so helpless. I'm scared, I say. I know, Mom says, but you're not alone. Sam reaches up to unclasp the pendant. She takes it in her palm, presses it into mine, and intertwines our fingers. Together we hold our little piece of magic, our piece of Halmoni. It's okay, I whisper, leaning so close to Halmoni that my lips brush her ear. I close my eyes and breathe. Sometimes the bravest thing is to stop running. It's okay if you go. We will be all right. I don't know for sure if she hears me, but I think she does. The room seems to sigh in relief. I look up and the world outside is dark, but through the windows, two small spots of light blink back at me. It's hard to see. It's hard to know for sure. It could be the reflection of the machines inside. or it could be the tiger eyes staring back at me. I watch them, my heart clenching tight like a little fist, and then they disappear, blinking closed. Something opens up inside me, a hole that wasn't there before, an emptiness and a loss, but also space. An open jar, a release. I lean my head against Halmoni's heart, and I sit in that small room with my family. When Halmoni finally does go, I know she's ready. She has always been brave. Chapter 45. The basement is flooded. The first night after we return to Halmoni's house, Mom throws the basement door open and shakes her head. Water laps at the steps. The boxes that Ricky and I worked so hard to stack slowly disintegrate into mush. Mom stares at the water for a long, long time before calling someone to get it fixed. The second night, Mom decides to sleep in Halmoni's room. Sam lies awake, biting her fingernails, and the rest of the house goes quiet. The floorboards don't whine beneath my feet. The doors don't sing. Without Halmoni, the house is just a house. A too quiet, too empty house that none of us know how to live in. The days pass quietly. The hours go blurry. Ricky texts me in a continuous stream of his favorite foods, trying to cheer me up. And on the seventh night, after one official week, he texts rice cakes. When I read the words, the threat of tears burns behind my eyes. I almost turn my phone off and hide beneath my covers. But his text reminds me of something. An important date rattles around in my head. On my phone, I check the calendar and see tomorrow is the bake sale. I have an idea, and for the first time all week, the heaviness in my chest lifts a little. I tell Ricky my plan, then text Jensen before throwing my blankets back. I run down the attic steps, not bothering with invisibility. Banging around the kitchen, gathering pots and pans, I fill our home with noise. The house begins to wake. Mom comes to the kitchen with Sam trailing her. "What are you doing?" Sam blinks. "Rice cakes for the bake sale." Sam's confused, but Mom doesn't question it. She walks over to me and starts pulling ingredients off the shelf: a jar of mochi flour, a box of sugar, adzuki bean paste. Sam says, "We don't have to do the bake sale." "We don't have to," I say, looking between her and Mom. "But maybe we should. All that food, all those people, it'll be like..." Understanding settles on Sam's face and her eyes ache with grief. Like a kosa. At the library. At the library, Mom says. For a moment she looks too pained to speak, but she does. The library was one of Halmoni's projects so many years ago. She painted it bright colors and added cheesy posters. She always wanted it to be a special place. I stare at her, wondering how, all this time, I never knew. But I don't have much time to process that because Sam asks Mom, "Do you know how to make the rice cakes?" Mom nods, but a bit of panic slips into her voice. I think, maybe, vaguely." And then softer, "I never thought to ask." I think of the time when I had asked Halmoni for her recipe. She said later, and now it's too late. But Mom looks hopeful, and I take a breath. "It's okay," I say. "Even if things aren't perfect, they can still be good." Mom squeezes my shoulder, and we begin measuring flour and coconut milk based on what feels right, and cooking together, mashing our hands into mochi batter that feels right. Chapter 46. Ricky and Jensen have spread the word. Nearly the whole town comes to the library for Halmoni's Kosa. Halmoni's friends fill the room with food and stories. People come up to us, tell us how sorry they are, how much they loved her. People we don't even know, people Halmoni helped or healed. Joe finds me, and at first I apologize. He isn't charging for the bake sale turned Kosa, of course, so the whole plan to save the library is ruined. "I know we were supposed to raise money," I say. Joe shakes his head. "This wasn't for money. This was for community. But maybe later we can discuss the break-in." My cheeks get hot. "How do you know about that?" "Intuition," he replies. "And the kid-sized muddy footprints everywhere?" Oh, I kind of forgot about that. but his mustache twitches and he smiles softly. Heartbroken is often messy. He hands me a cookie and I thank him. Across the library, Mom talks about to a few adults I don't recognize, and Sam finds her way to Jensen. Jensen takes Sam in her arms and kisses the top of her head, and Sam leans against Jensen's neck. There's a love between them that confuses me for a moment. And all of a sudden it makes sense. Sam's weirdness when she first saw Jensen, the nervousness when Sam asked me about her later, the way Jensen helped Sam scatter rice, the way Sam had tried to call her for help. They're a couple. I'm stunned, even though it now seems obvious. They're a good match. Jensen's nice and Sam's soft with her, and they fit. On the other side of the library, I see Ricky with his friends. They all wave to me, and Ricky abandons them for a moment, walking up to me with a wicker basket in his arms. He's wearing a black bowler hat today, a glamorous one that Halmoni would have loved. Chocolate muffins, he explains. Joe gave me his recipe. And then with a tilted smile, I promise, no mud. He holds out the basket, the great grandson of a tiger hunter offering baked goods to the great granddaughter of a tiger god. I accept it, and warmth spreads up my fingertips and through my body. A small part of me perks up, smiles, and I'm not sure the smile reaches my face, but maybe this is how healing starts. Small bits of happiness waking up inside you until maybe one day it spreads through your whole self. I passed my language arts test, he says, so we'll be in the same grade in the fall. I smile, for real this time. That's great, Ricky. He grins, and when I excuse myself, he gets it. He knows I'm not ready for a full conversation yet. I slip out the heavy front doors and sit on the steps, cradling the muffins on my lap. I think about our conversation before, about learning who you are, even in not you situations. I've been doing that, pushing back the edges of me, trying to find the borders, and I'm realizing that I'm so much more than I thought. Right now, I feel infinite. I take a bite of a muffin and then cough, spitting it into my palm. Salt! Ricky must have mixed the sugar up with the salt. The unexpected flavor shocks a laugh out of me. Can I sit? Someone asks. At first, I think the voice is the tiger's. I keep expecting to hear her or catch a glimpse of her out of the corner of my eye, but I also know, deep down, she's gone. When I turn, I see Sam, who sits down next to me without waiting for a response. She reaches into the basket, grabbing a muffin without asking. I wouldn't, I say, but it's too late. Sam's already choking on her bite, spitting her own mouthful into her palm. She stares at me and I laugh, and she laughs. And then we stop, abruptly dumping the chewed up muffins back into the basket. It feels wrong to be happy right now. Does it get easier? I ask. Does the sadness go away? Sam stares ahead. The sadness fades, yeah, eventually. But the missing, I don't know if that ever does. I press my thumb against my palm, and when I close my eyes, I can almost imagine it Halmoni's, tracing my lifeline, telling me everything is going to be okay. The evening air heats my skin. It finally feels like August, and I fill my lungs with warmth. Sam scoots closer until our arms touch. In the sky, the sun is setting, and the moon peeks over the trees. Will you tell me another story? She asks. I breathe in. The seconds swell. I find my voice. Long, long ago, I begin. I don't yet know the ending, but I will face my story as it changes and grows. Because of Halmoni, I can be brave. I can be anything. I'm a girl who sees invisible things, but I am not invisible. Author's note. When I was little, my Halmoni told me stories. My younger sister and I would curl up in bed with her, and as she spoke of ghosts and tigers, our world filled with magic. In those moments, I would have sworn I heard tigers outside the bedroom, their sharp claws scritching against the wood floors. I could practically see their shadows seeping under the door. On those nights, I felt connected to a line of Korean women I'd never known, as if their stories still lived in my blood. When I listened to Halmoni, I wasn't part white, part Asian, one quarter Korean mixed. I was just full me, and I knew it in my bones. Years later, when I left Hawaii for college, I abandoned the stories, not intentionally, just by accident, as though they'd slid under my bed and gathered dust. Before long, I forgot they were missing. I didn't know how much I needed them until late in college, when somebody asked if I was Korean. Just a quarter, I answered. The words felt wrong as soon as I'd spoken them. The answer, quite simply, has always been yes. But somewhere along the way, I'd started dividing my blood into parts. Wanting to be whole again, I turned back to the stories, reading old fairy tales and searching the internet. But they were different now. These were not my Halmoni stories. Somehow they had shape shifted. Maybe they had changed. Maybe I couldn't find them. Maybe my Halmoni had told different versions and invented some entirely. When I asked her to recall her story, she waved her hand. Oh, so long ago, she said. I don't know what to say. So, with nowhere else to turn, I wrote my own story. I started with my favorite. Two siblings run from a tiger escaping into the sky to become the sun and the moon. It's a popular story with many variations, but I always felt like the story was hiding something, and I always wanted to know its secrets. The tiger in the story is clever and determined. It dresses up as the children's grandmother. It hunts them down. It attempts to trick them, and when that doesn't work, it chases them far and wide. It tries to chase them into the sky. The tiger is ceaseless in its pursuit, and I always wondered, what does it want? Nothing so crass as meat. This felt like more. What could be so important, so powerful, that the tiger would chase these children across the world? I wrote a dozen drafts in search of the answer, but it didn't come easily. It was as if I had to prove I was trustworthy before the story would reveal its secrets. So I worked for it. I dug back through my family history and the history of Korea. I read about colonialism and oppression, about a hidden language and forgotten stories, about comfort women and imposed silence. But in this dark history, I found strength too. Korean people, Korean women in particular, are fierce and resilient, and as I worked, I understood my Halmoni and myself better. My research revealed strange coincidences. In an early draft, I'd written about star jars full of magic without really knowing why. The idea had seemed to come out of nowhere. Later I discovered Chilseong, or the seven stars, a deity that watches over children and is often honored by the setting out of bowls or jars. Similarly, in my story, I'd invented a small Korean island where the sea parts once a year. While poring over a map of Korea, trying to find a place for my fictional village, I learned that it already exists. Jindo, a seaside island where once a year, due to a combination of tides and maybe just a bit of magic, the ocean really does part. I I worked like this, alternating between writing and research, treating these coincidences as clues, as if I were piecing together a story that had already been told long, long ago, and I had only had to bridge the gaps. I worked my way through history all the way back to to the Korean origin myth, and there I found the biggest coincidence. Before my research, I had a vague understanding of the origin myth, but for some reason, my Halmoni had never told us this one. It goes like this. Long, long ago, there was a heavenly prince who ruled over Earth. His job was easy enough until a bear and a tiger, tired of their wild lives, asked him to turn them human. He said that if they lived in a cave for 100 days and ate only mugwort and garlic, they would become women. The bear succeeded, and the god rewarded her with a human body. Together they created the Korean people. But the tiger was impatient. She wouldn't deal with those conditions. She ran out of the cave and was doomed to a life of stalking through the forest as a beast alone. I'd known about the bear woman, but until then I'd never heard about the tiger. And yet in my draft I'd written about a tiger girl who asks the sky god to turn her human. The words had felt right when I wrote them, though I didn't quite understand them. Now this felt like more than a coincidence. Yes, maybe I'd heard the story before and it had burrowed, long forgotten, into my subconscious. But all the same, I felt connected to something bigger. I felt like the way I had so many years earlier, as if these stories lived in my blood, even the ones I'd never heard before. I dug deeper into the myth and found a critical essay called Bedding the Nation by Seung Suk Moon. According to Moon, the transformation of a bear into a woman carries the deep social meaning of womanhood epitomized by patience to endure suffering and ordeal. And with that, my story finally fell into place. Here was the secret history. Because if the bear represents Korean women, or a version of womanhood that means suffering and silent endurance, what then of the tiger? What about the women who had refused to suffer and was banished for it? What would happen if she came back? What would she want? And what story would she tell? Here are the acknowledgments, and what a wonderful story. Thanks for listening.